Yeah.
So this is joint work with James, Giuseppe Migali, my colleague at Lancaster, and we got our heads together last May to talk about this pairwise conversations. I had a conversation with James in court, and we thought about the data possibilities for this, and James did indeed take charge of the data and did an amazing job putting a huge data set together, which I'm going to be talking about. So you probably know what VAR is, Video Assistant Referee, technology designed to assist on-field referee decision-making, checking for clear and obvious errors and serious missed incidents in football. And the motivation from the thought from the authorities was that on-field referees were making too many mistakes that got scrutinized afterwards and were viewed critically. And the thought was, well, stakeholders, fans, teams, players were being disadvantaged by these mistakes. So let's use technology to get rid of some of these mistakes. So we've got technology used to complement officials' decision-making in other sports, cricket and tennis, for example, North American sports. I'll come to that later. In the case of football, what we've got here, a video assistant referee is actually a person, not just the technology. It's a referee, and the referee externally is looking at video playbacks. And that's important because it's not just a matter of being instructed, as it were, by technology. So this is an example. I don't know if I can get this up. An example recently. Now, what I'm going to do here is open this out. I'm going to help you. Okay, let's see if this will enable the example to take place. Here we go. I hope it's a bit slow.
We're still looking at your slide, Rob. I don't know, it might not go through to the web browser.
Carry on with it.
Yeah, we can't see anything at this end, just still see your slides, Rob.
So, without the sort of
you need to have it open and then share screen again.
Sorry?
You need to go through share screen again and choose a different window.
It worked.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to the. Here we go. Back to the PowerPoint. Are we here now?
You're at the PowerPoint, but if you want to show the video, you want to go to your web browser instead, Rob?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll skip that anyway.
You open the video and then start screen sharing again, and you'll be able to choose the video since it will be open from your web browser.
Right. Well, I'm going to skip it anyway. What that was about was Aston Villa versus Sheffield United, where there was a goal not allowed. And the point about that game was that on TV, it was pretty clear that there should have been a goal allowed because the goalkeeper took the ball inside the net. And amazingly, the people in the VAR control room didn't see this. It wasn't signaled by the camera work available to them. Apparently, there were too many defenders in the way, which is a rather amusing excuse. So the goal was disallowed, and the point there is that, well, this is actually quite important because Aston Villa are in relegation trouble. They're fighting against relegation, and this lack of goal for Sheffield United might have given Aston Villa an advantage. The game finished 0-0, and that might be 1 point, might be course, there's always counterfactuals here, which keeps us entertained in sports. That lack of goal could have given Aston Villa a point extra relative to their rivals. And as Stefan Szymanski will show us later, the cost of relegation from the English Premier League is enormous. Lower bound estimate will be something like 100 million euros. So this has possible widespread implications. It also highlights that the VAR process wasn't working effectively. A serious missed incident occurred and VAR didn't spot it and didn't act. So there are lots of biases in officials' decision-making in sport that are alluded to in the literature. Time added on, Fergie time, as it's called, after Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. And Sir Alex used to actually tap his watch at the end of a game and give a kind of expression of disapproval to the referee. In other words, give us some more time. And the allegation was that more time would be added on to the game when the home team was behind in score, as opposed to being ahead in score when maybe the coach would want the game to be stopped a wee bit quicker. And that was investigated famously in a paper by Garicano et al. In Review of Economic Statistics 2005. Now, further on, there's been social pressure suggested in terms of home team bias, in terms of yellow cards award. Baraimo et al. In Journal of Royal Statistical Society, that I'm part of the et al. Dave is there as well. And Peter Dawson et al. As well before us in 2007. And several papers have argued that there might be home team bias in terms of yellow cards and maybe other game outcomes.
Well, I think we're still stuck on slide 2.
Okay, back off that. Do I come out again?
I don't know, but what we can see is slide 2. And I think you're talking on a further on slide, aren't you now?
Yes, I am. Do I need to reshare?
Yeah, I think if you share the presentation, if you can.
Okay. Got you. Right, I think I know what to do. Okay, we're here. Okay, it's the same problem that I had earlier. Do it that way, will that help you?
Yeah, we can see the right slide now.
Yep. Like that, and next. I'm there.
Yeah.
And I'm going here. Okay.
Yeah.
Great stuff. So what this paper is going to be about, and I am going to cut through a lot of the literature stuff so we get to the results, is that VAR in multiple football leagues. We've got a big data set, thanks to James, lots of leagues, and we have variation in terms of when the video assistant referee system was introduced at different times. We're going to make a distinction between having the system overall, if you like, a threat. What are the effects of having the system in terms of football outcomes across games and seasons across different countries? This is match level analysis. But then we drill down further, what's happening in a given match when VAR is actually applied in a given match. What are the outcomes again in terms of, for example, yellow cards, shots on goal, goals themselves, red cards, and so on. And further still, but very preliminary, we've got some results minute by minute during the game. What happens during a game after a VAR decision has been applied. We're going to find some positive effects of VAR in terms of player discipline and more attacking football. That evidence is somewhat scattered, and we have a lot more work to do to finesse that. But further on, there's a newer approach, new to me anyway. James has been involved with this separately in some of his work. Consumer responses using sentiment analysis, where we extract text using software called TextBlob, and using specifically Kicker journalist reports. We investigate, we peruse the reports, and we find evidence of critical commentary on VR intervention, specifically in one league, Bundesliga. So hopefully I'll get to that at the very end. So you probably know what VAR is. It's advice, if you like, from an external referee on critical decisions. And those are goals, penalties, direct red cards. Mistaken identity is not really much of a factor here. Goals are automatically checked, and most times the goal stands and there's no intervention. You don't even know that the check has been made. It's just done as what they call a silent check. If there is some kind of possible mistake, there is a delay to the game, the VAR does intervene in terms of reviewing the original decision. That review process is communicated to the referee on field through the referee's headset. And a couple of things are possible here. The referee could just accept the VAR decision, signal that the decision has been made. The referee makes a kind of square signal with his finger to show people that something's going on from VAR. And then the original decision might stand, or the decision could be overturned. Sometimes, quite often, in fact, the referee might go to a pitchside monitor and, as an extra part of the process, monitor the replay, check for himself, and then make the decision. Come to that a bit later. So ignoring the VAR is simply not going to happen. This process involves a lot of technology, a lot of camera work. It's high cost. In fact, originally in 2018, Brazil's Serie A rejected VAR due to the high cost involved of 5 million euros per year. Alternatively, since broadcasters, there are limited advertising opportunities during the game, the VAR is a break in play. So there might be some advertising opportunities there where they can pick up some revenue. So this has been used over the last 3 years. It was first trialed in Major League Soccer. Australian A-League adopted it in 2017. It was used at the FIFA World Cup in Russia. Slight differences in implementation across countries. In France, there's a truck outside the stadium and the crew are inside the truck. In Germany, there is a control room somewhere in a basement in Cologne. Video assistant referee is typically a referee himself, part of the referee panel. And normally the VAR is supported by some additional staff, an assistant and a technician in charge of the technology. And we know who these guys are. The names are publicized by TV coverage. So early adopters of VAR were Major League Soccer. Brazil eventually got it together. Mexico, Germany, and Italy. Later on, France and Spain. Later still, current season in England. And even later, Argentina's still arguing about it, about which technology to adopt and who sponsors all of this. So one of the problems we have with all this, something to bear in mind, is that along the way, laws of the game have changed. So confounding factors here are changes to the handball rule and application of the offside rule, especially the handball law. Even yesterday in England, there were 2 goals disallowed through rather peculiar handball incidents where a player was not involved in the final shot for the goal, but was involved in the build-up play and the ball inadvertently touched the player's hands. That's a product of the handball law. In terms of the interpretation of the current law, the goals did indeed have to be ruled out. Notice that some other sports do it differently. There are appeal systems. If you watch NFL, then you're familiar now with the red flag from the head coach. The coach is challenged. Cricket has a review system which is prompted by the players rather than external officials. So the process is done differently in different sports. And there's some literature on this which I'll really quickly review. I'm not going to even dwell on all the papers. I'm noting, though, that Bradbury, for the Journal of Sports Economics, argues that training and development are sufficient, apparently. I mean, baseball is rather odd in a sense, because one of the key decisions is the strike called against the batter and for the pitcher. And this involves a really fine eyesight to detect the strike inside a particular zone, the strike zone. This is done with the naked eye and is not reviewable on field. Whether it'll stay like that is an interesting possibility. I'll leave that to our American colleagues to tell us more about that. Cricket has had the decision review system. There are various papers on that. These papers are not necessarily supportive of the system. Bourard argued that the system was costly, and the cricket system, or the authorities, would be better off investing in umpires, in training and development, rather like Bradbury's arguments in Major League Baseball. There are a couple of papers on VAR from the sports science direction. One paper, Lago Penis and co-authors, looked at Italy and Germany, arguing that players committed fewer fouls in the second half of games. When VAR was implemented, fewer offsides, penalties, and yellow cards. A second paper looked at reviews after games, where professional referees were invited to look at video playbacks. And what was found there, I mean, the referees were randomly assigned to view the playback in real time or in slow motion. When faced with slow motion, the referees were more likely to argue in favor of a red card for a bad tackle. And one argument there is, well, the video replay actually slows down the play and makes the foul tackle look worse than it might look on the field. Plus, the on-field referee might arguably be better positioned to judge the context, extent of aggression there. So I'm going to skip through this next section also fairly quickly. Various reports from the individual leagues suggesting broadly that interventions have occurred. There's a sizable number of decisions that are overturned, relatively few numbers missed by VAR, and we've got type 1, type 2 errors, so number wrongly changed is actually quite small. And decision accuracy, crucially, apparently has gone up according to these league commission reports. Likewise, in Italy, it was argued there again from league sources that the percentage of errors in the first season of VAR was quite small compared to previously without VAR. So there's a claim here that accuracy of decisions has increased. And also the behavior might have improved, especially in terms of simulation, a drop of simulation, because with VAR, that's perhaps more likely to be spotted and dealt with. And the action here is actually to penalise the player and award a caution yellow card. So various sources externally suggesting that maybe VAR has led to some improvements. What do we find? We're looking at 4 seasons. We'll leave out the current season with COVID interruption, although that will be an interesting season to study later on, various natural experiment possibilities there. But we've got data from ESPN with match commentaries and full reports of match events. We've got details of VAR incidents, what the incidents were, who was affected, what the outcome of the incident was, whether decisions were overturned. We've got details from supporting sources on referees, on the results, and we've got 11 leagues in total, covering the 4 seasons. Now, the best way to see it is through a treatment control group configuration. So in that setup, England is a control group all the way through, because England only started VAR in 1920 and we're leaving that out. France introduced VAR in 2018-19, but it wasn't there in 17-18. Germany, it was there in both seasons. We've actually got, if I get it right, we've got a few leagues where it's treatment all the way through, not just in Europe, but covering US, Australia, Brazil, and Mexico. So what we do is we look at the incidence of VAR reviews, delays incurred by VAR reviews, and the impact of reviews on measured outcomes. And the reception of fans to VAR is going to be proxied by the journalist reports from Kicker at the back end. We've got lots of measured outcomes. We've got goals, we've got shots on and off target, corners, saves, yellow and red cards, fouls, and offsides. This is the basic model. It's outcome as a function of controls, and then whether VAR is present in the league in a given season, which is VAR. And then VAR number is the number of incidents in a match. Now, to watch out here, you might get one incident in a match, but it's very rare to get 2 or even 3. Actually, there are many matches, most of them even, where there's no VAR intervention at all in terms of a key decision. We've got referee, season and country fixed effects, and we've also got assistant referee fixed effects for the offside decisions. And it's the variation in adoption of the VAR that gives us our econometric identification here. The minute-by-minute estimate will be linear probability model at match level, and then we can track what happens after a VAR intervention. And I'll explain a bit more on that in a moment. So, in terms of outcomes, number of VAR incidents you can see is relatively small there. And by the way, we can split this between first half and second half. We've got home and away outcomes, we've got the VAR variables. The controls include ELO strengths of competing teams. We don't have payroll information extending over our 11 leagues. That's too difficult to get. We've got attendances and we've got the age of the referee. The first set of regressions to get into. This is the added time. And the key result here is at the bottom. So there we go. In bold, 0.69 for the coefficient of goal difference after 90 minutes plus 1. What that's telling us is if the home team is ahead by a goal, there are 0.69 of a minute being added on. Whereas if the home team is behind in score, the added time from that coefficient is 1.04 minutes. What does that mean? I'll skip that a second. It means that the referees are adding more time on when the home team is behind by 1 goal as compared to winning by a goal. So the differences are statistically significant, and this is exactly in line with the social pressure literature. The effect is mediated by crowd size, so there were some interaction terms with attendance. But going to the headline result, we are finding some support for the social pressure argument of Garicano and various other authors that have followed on from that. Moreover, if we've got 64 seconds being added on average, which is what we find, then that seems rather short for many or even most VAR incidents. We would expect 80 seconds to 120 seconds, depending on whether the referee consults the pitch side monitor or not, and also the complexity of the incident. So 64 seconds seems to us somewhat short, and what we are thinking here is that the referees are not compensating for the VAR process in terms of adding on the full amount of time at the end of games. It's not being factored in sufficiently. That's not firm, that evidence. We need to do a bit more, and what we clearly need to do is to actually check fully how much time is taken up with the VAR process itself during the game. Moving on to outcome regressions. Large sample, 13,000 with our 11 leagues here. So I'll go through a few of these, not all. For example, if there are more incidents in the game, there are more shots on target by the home team. The second season is a dummy, which applies specifically for those leagues that have second season experience of VAR. And it seems that in the second season, after the system has bedded in perhaps, and there's been some learning by players and officials, we get more shots on target by the away team and more goals for each team. Generally, we see from these results more attacking play from each team on average. Admittedly, that's a sort of broad brush conclusion. So VAR eligible suggests from that's just having the system, fewer offsides for each team. And to me, offside is player discipline. Checking across your line if you're a forward, where the defenders are. The defenders are trying to catch you out by stepping up. A really good player is cute about being exactly on line with the defense and then can move for a ball through to maybe have a goal scoring opportunity. VAR eligible then is just having the system. The VAR active is about having the incidents in the game, and here we find more goals for each team, slightly more for the home team, more shots on target for the home team, but not for the away team. So again, some evidence that there is some more attacking play. Now, in terms of discipline, there's a couple of interesting things to highlight here. These are regressions separately for fouls, yellow cards, and red cards. What we've got here are, in the second season, there fewer fouls by each team, but more yellow cards by the away team in the second season. And the first season, or generally, it's negative. That gets wiped out in the second season. And also, we get more cards in the home team if there are more incidents involving VAR during the game. So there's a kind of interesting contrast in results with fewer fouls by home and away teams, but some evidence there of more yellow cards when VAR is activated during games. So this leads to the thought that maybe we should go minute by minute. So we've got various outcomes here, similar to before, but what we're now doing is, with a similar set of controls, ELO strength, attendance, and so on, we're able to check what happens during the game after a VAR decision has been made. And here we're going to make a distinction between just a review, but also a review that overturns a decision. Now, that's important in two respects. It's important because the players could respond to that. They might either get disillusioned by the overturn, if it's against them, if it's against their team, or they might be fueled up and they might try harder to, as it were, do battle to have a decision that, with or without VAR, that works in their favour next time around when there's a similar incident, especially involving a goal-scoring opportunity. Alternatively, the referees might respond. The referees might be worried if there's a VAR overturn that they're not doing a good job. So in that respect, they might tighten up on the award of yellow and red cards, think further about their decision making. So what happens in our results? Well, what we find, we think is quite interesting, is that there's and you can think of this as linear probability, the way this is being done, because it's minute by minute in the dependent variable. What we've got here is a greater probability of both yellow and second yellow leading to a red, of course, with overturned decisions, and yet lower probability of fouls. So there's a bit of a contrast here. Now, I suggested two mechanisms, the referees and the players. what we think is going on is that the referees are more concerned to award cards if the VAR overturned earlier decisions. There's a concern that the VAR intervenes and overrules, and that reflects poorly on the referee control of the game. Alternatively, players might perform more illegal behaviour after an overturned decision, but there's fewer fouls or lower probability of foul. And this seems to us to point to a referee response rather than a player response. And there's more red cards for VAR overturned decisions. Now, I'm not showing the results for this, but we looked at this in terms of home and away teams separately, and the results that I'm showing there were confirmed when we do that split. Okay, now, how much time have I got, James?
You've got about 5 minutes to allow some time for discussion.
Okay, I'm going to very quickly point to the audience reaction. I think I should do this because we've had quite a bit today about audience and TV viewers and such like. So very briefly, what I've got here is the sentiment analysis. What is the reaction off the field? And we've used text evidence from Kicker magazine. What this does is scan content for keywords and computes measures of subjectivity and polarity. Subjectivity refers to the, if you like, whether an event is factually described. Converse of that is objectivity. Polarity is whether there is critical commentary. It's used in political science. Best way to show it is this, a Donald Trump tweet, where the subjectivity involving words like nice and great is very strong, and the polarity is also positive because it says it's only kind of very supportive and positive direction. So we do that for Kicker reports, and what we find is more objective reporting. Well, there's more events to talk about in the report. VAR is an event, so it's bound to be reported. But the sentiment moves in a negative direction when VAR is used. In other words, the sentiment becomes more critical. So the Kicker reports on polarity, we actually did a regression of this, suggests that the Kicker journalist, at least, and it's arguable whether they really proxy fan opinion, of course, we can get into that separately, more reviews involves, well, you have to flip it the other way around, actually, that's involving more critical commentary on the polarity scores. So the newspapers are picking up some adverse reporting of VAR. And why is that? Well, the decision might be wrong. It could be it takes too long. Some sense of injustice here. And right now in England, to finish, VAR is heavily criticised by many fans. Maybe that's a learning effect in the first season. But VAR gets, well, there's even chanting and swearing against VAR inside the stadium, as was before the COVID interruption. So the lesson for that is that VAR is here to stay, but it does need to be used in a way which is in the interests of the audiences, both inside the stadium on TV. And that, to me, is a more important issue than outcome uncertainty. Loads of things we're going to do. Maybe they'll come up in discussion, but I'll finish at that point.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Now, do I need to do something here?
You can leave the slides on for now because questions might refer to some of the slides, perhaps.
Okay.
They don't have any questions they want to ask? Any comments, questions?
Rob, can I ask you a question?
Go on.
So the second season effect that you demonstrate. So I wonder if it comes in earlier than that. If you think back to some of the literature looking at rule changes in sport, the tackle from behind comes to mind almost immediately. There is that players took a little bit of time to adapt. They adapted within about 3 or 4 months. So I'm wondering whether it's worth checking just to see whether that kind of that process occurs here as well. So not taking the second season, but maybe taking the second half of the first season
Right.
its introduction, or maybe even sooner, just kind of checking to see whether players or indeed the referee adapts quicker, because I think it could be a referee effect here as well, because maybe it's taking time for the referees to kind of get used to the kind of the new system.
Right, so the learning could kick in earlier. That's a really good point, Peter. So yeah, we'll get that going. We can do that clearly. Splitting the season sounds like the way to go. And I think the way to do it here is, especially for the European leagues with the winter break, maybe before and after the winter break would be a natural way of tackling that.
Yeah, that's one way. We could also simply just add in, the number of games that have been played under VAR is something else that we could do. Sort of working on essentially on a match by match basis.
I guess could I ask a second one? Sorry, I'm going to just hog the screen for a while now. You mentioned about the on-field referee, and obviously you had information about the VAR referee.
Yes. So
once an on-field referee has officiated a few VAR matches, I'm just wondering whether that affects their behaviour next time they officiate an on-field match, so that their kind of experience of being a VAR official makes any. It's purely speculative. I just kind of come up with that now, just on the hoof. But
no,
I think
that's a great idea. We haven't. I mean, all we've got is referee fixed effects, but obviously we know the identity of the referee and we know the identity of the VAR. So we should be able to get that. I think that's right, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So we should do that. Yes. I mean, these are, to be clear, the referees in the booth are experienced referees. They're not usually rookies. There might be some differences in seniority. One worry is that a junior referee might be more lenient towards a senior referee, career concerns and so on, but we can get into all this.
Okay, I'll leave it there for now. I might come back.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. David, your hand up. You're on mute. I'll try and unmute you. No,
have you got me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm glad you called me, because I actually wanted for some clarification from the slide that Rod's got up at the moment, which is slide 21. I'm particularly interested in this because when it comes to referee bias, I always think that this is the purest test, because it's the decision where the player's conduct is not likely to be driving it. It's a pure referee decision. So I want to make sure that I understand this slide. Now, is this showing the extra time which is associated with a VAR activation, or what is it showing?
Yes, so number of VAR incidents, first half, second half, would be, if there's one incident, that would be one. If there was two, there'd be two. And so, yeah, the coefficient's telling you how much each incident added on to the amount of injury time. There's more time added on in close matches than in clear-cut matches, because these are all 0 or 1 goal difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is that coefficient on goal difference -1 significantly different from the other two?
It's significantly different to 0.69 for sure.
Uh-huh. And who's adding on the time?
Oh, the on-field referee for sure. The VAR has got no discretion over added time.
So the on-field referee notes the time's been lost.
Yes.
And if it's not a close game, he doesn't bother very much, is what it looks like, in taking account of the time. But if he's got an excuse to add on time, he'll maybe add on 12 seconds more if it's to the advantage of the home team.
That's right, yeah.
So it's quite a small effect compared within the Palacios Huerta paper.
Well, this has got ingrained into referee training by now, I think. So the referees' bodies are aware of this problem.
No, I'm not criticizing, or I'm just finding out what it says, because
Sure.
you put it forward as a referee bias conclusion of the paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to us is that these coefficients stand up, albeit not hugely in terms of number. But even though we have a VAR system imposed available, the bias is still there.
Let me just, as a side comment, so you can think in complete terms, because you're covering everything to do with VAR. You perhaps don't know that the bookmaking industry has been hurt by VAR, because the key to revenue is to keep the bettor on the website on his mobile phone. And the VAR delay proves to be a significant trigger to people leaving the website and losing the bets on the rest of the match. So, as always, there can be unforeseen consequences. And incidentally, if you go to cricket, cricket was a very early adopter, and the unacknowledged in public reason why cricket was so keen was to take power away from the umpire, because of the number of umpire corruption cases that it had had, rather than trying to improve the efficiency of the umpiring.
Well, that's a
Thank
really
you.
interesting take. Yeah,
Thanks, David.
I wasn't aware of that. Certainly, there's pressure to reduce the amount of time taken up in VAR decisions for a number of reasons, not just that one. If you're inside the stadium, it's a complete pain to have to wait so long. Giuseppe Migali, one of our co-authors, argued, well, the amount of time taken up by VAR is small relative to throw-ins, goal kicks, etc. But to me, this is one extra amount of added time or waiting. Really, the game doesn't need so much.
Rob, I have a question.
Yeah.
Which years did you take? I missed it. What are the 2 years that you take?
So what we've done here, I wasn't fully clear on that. Those are the years when
17,
the
18,
VAR might have been applied, but we've got 2 seasons before that with no one having VAR. It's actually 4 seasons.
So, but the diff in diff is 17, 18 compared to 18, 19. Is that correct?
Well, what we've got here is multi-state difference in difference. So we've got some leagues which, like the T, like Italy, have VAR for 2 seasons, and we've got some leagues where VAR is imposed later, like Spain, just 18, 19.
Yeah, well, what I mean is that there was a big change in the UEFA in the Champions League structure, because starting from, I think, 18, 19, there were more teams allowed to participate in the Champions League, which could create some, the year before, there were 2 changes.
Right.
So there was a VAR thing, and there was let's say, a different price structure.
Okay.
And then it's really difficult to disentangle one from the other.
Oh, there's quite a few confounding effects here. You're absolutely right. Notice that our broad coverage is 11 leagues, of which 5 are involved in Champions League, and the other 6 are from outside of Europe. So there's a bit more there. But yes, we are concerned about confounding effects. And if we do a separate European analysis, which we will do, then that Champions League change would have to be considered.
And on top of it, you always have this pre-World Cup European Championship season that players may want to avoid some injuries or something like that. So that the 2 months before the World Cup, you know, they are concerned not to be injured. So
right.
And you have it like only one season, you don't have the other season.
Player behaviour might change in those seasons.
Yeah.
Could maybe tease that out a bit. And
Just to take a look on it, to be careful.
no, thanks. That's fine.
Any more questions and comments?
Yeah, can I add on Alex's point? You cannot control for possible differences in referee training when the VAR is introduced. So let's say the referees in Italy have been made familiar with the systems during extended training sessions, while in Germany, nothing has happened. So, and then it's not clear whether you over or underestimate the effects that you find, right?
Right. That's a good point. Not thought too hard about that. I suppose we could look at announcement effects of VAR, but it doesn't follow that the training doesn't automatically follow, I think is your point. You can know that VAR is coming and not do much about it in terms of training the referees. Is that your point?
Yeah, and it may well be that in the first season after the introduction of VAR, a large percentage of the referee pool has been replaced in some countries, but not in others.
Yeah, that's another good point.
So what you need are referees who were active under both regimes and compare their behavior.
That would be at referee level, which would be a separate analysis, but that sounds worth doing. That's interesting.
Could you use, when did it come into the European Cup competitions? So when did they introduce, they introduced it earlier in Champions League and Europa League, didn't they?
It's not in the Europa League, but it's been in Champions League for at least a couple of years, right?
So you've got potentially referees in these countries, certainly in the European countries, that have had experience of officiating under a VAR regime. So quite apart from Bernd's point about the training, even if you can't get information on that, you can get information on whether some of these officials at least have had some prior experience of officiating under a VAR regime in the European competitions, and that might be a way of teasing out that possible effect. So maybe they adapt quicker. Again, goes back to that point about how quickly players and officials adapt. So this again could apply to players as well. So those teams that have been playing in European competitions, maybe those teams, the players of those teams, maybe adapt quicker to the introduction of VAR in the domestic leagues than, so you can even look at players when they kind of transfer between teams. So it's not necessarily just a team effect. It could well be individual player effects going on here. Because assuming unless we're assuming that all footballers are stupid.
But Peter, another point on this issue. Those who officiate in Champions League matches have been identified by their national associations as their best referees. So that means in the end, we may end up with comparing apples and oranges. Excellent referees and good referees.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, either way, we should be able to pick out the referee identity.
Yeah, we've got that
Do a
information.
separate Champions League analysis anyway, so we could look at it from that perspective. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm conscious that we've eaten into the break. Our next session is at 4:45, so in just under half an hour's time. So thank you, Rob, for the plenary talk. Very interesting talk. Based on myself being involved with the research itself, and thank you everybody for your contribution.
Great, thanks for the comments.
Thank you, Rob.